You know that feeling, that really intense sense of deja vu, where for just a second everything feels off, kind of heavy, almost silent? Well, for some people, that feeling is just the first step on a journey they never, ever planned on taking.
All right, let's get right into it. Imagine you're walking down a street you've known your whole life. You could walk it blindfolded. But then, bam! In the blink of an eye, the asphalt is gone. It's cobblestone now. The cars have vanished, and suddenly there are people in these strange, old-fashioned clothes bustling past, and they're giving you these weird looks. You haven't moved an inch, but when you are, that's a totally different story.
So, this is the whole idea behind what people call a time slip. We're not talking about some deliberate trip in a fancy machine, right? This is a totally spontaneous, bizarre thing where it feels like the past and present just overlap for a second and it yanks some unsuspecting person right into another time. And believe me, there are thousands of these stories out there. But a few of them, they've become absolutely legendary. So let's dig into one of the most famous and supposedly well-documented cases of all time. That quote, that eerie feeling, is exactly how two highly respected academics from Oxford, we're talking serious, credible people, Charlotte Mobley and Eleanor Jourdain, described their experience way back in 1901. They were just visiting the Palace of Versailles in France when all of a sudden the world around them just seemed to flattened out like an old, faded photo. So they're looking for a specific spot in the gardens, probably a little lost. And then things get weird. The whole vibe changes. They start seeing men in these old school long coats and three-cornered hats, and they're speaking this archaic French. They pass more and more people who just look out of time. And then they see her, a woman sketching on the lawn. They later became absolutely convinced it was Marie Antoinette herself. In their minds, they'd somehow fallen back into the year 1792.
I mean, the Versailles story is wild enough, right? But what if you didn't go to the past? What if the past came to you? Like literally marched right through your house. Well, that brings us to the even stranger story of a plumber named Harry Martindale.
Okay, so it's 1953. A young plumber's apprentice, Harry Martindale, is working down in a dark basement in York, England. Out of nowhere, he hears this strange horn sound. And then, a whole troop of Roman soldiers marches straight out of the wall. He said they looked totally solid, but also tired and miserable. And the weirdest part? He could only see them from the knees up. Now, for years, this is just a crazy story. But decades later, a couple of things happen that make you go, wait a minute. First, archaeologists discover an ancient Roman road just 18 inches below the floor of that exact basement. And second, later research confirms the details Harry described. The round shields, the green tunics, those didn't belong to the famous Roman legionaries you always see in movies. Nope, they belonged to auxiliary soldiers, a detail a plumber in 1953 would have absolutely no way of knowing. I mean, stories like these are just, wow. They really make you wonder, how could this possibly happen? Well, the explanations are all over the map, from the seriously paranormal all the way to the cutting edge of modern physics.
Okay, so let's start with a couple of the more out there theories. They both suggest the Earth itself is to blame. The first one is about something called telluric currents. Just think of them as these natural electrical rivers flowing deep inside the Earth's crust. The theory goes that in some places, like Liverpool, which is a supposed hotspot for this stuff, man-made things like the underground rail system can actually amplify these currents, maybe creating little time vortices. Then you've got a similar idea with ley lines. These are these hypothetical energy lines that are said to connect ancient, sacred sites all over the globe. The idea is that where these lines cross, the energy is so intense that the wall between different times gets super thin, maybe thin enough to walk right through.
All right, but we don't have to stick with just paranormal explanations. Modern physics, I mean, it's completely turned our everyday idea of time on its head.
In fact, let's look at two huge ideas from modern science that don't just bend the rules of time, they kind of shatter them.
First up, you've got Einstein's relativity. And here's the crazy thing. It proved that time isn't this constant ticking clock. It can actually stretch and shrink, depending on how fast you're going or how strong gravity is. That's a proven fact called time dilation. So, could some weird unknown force create a little bubble of that effect, just for a second, and knock someone out of sync with everyone else? And then you have the absolutely mind-bending world of quantum mechanics. Down at that tiny, tiny level, the whole idea of past, present, and future just gets fuzzy. It all might be happening at once.
So from that perspective, a time slip could just be a glitch, a momentary crack in the code where you accidentally see into a parallel universe or another moment happening at the same time. And this all leads us to maybe the most famous idea of all, the wormhole. You might have heard it called an Einstein-Rosen bridge. The simplest way to think about it is like folding a piece of paper. Imagine two dots on that paper, far apart. If you fold the paper over, you can poke a hole right through and connect them instantly. That's the idea of a wormhole, a shortcut through space and time. Now, we've never actually found one, but here's the thing. The math that runs our universe says they could exist. So the big question is, could a person accidentally trip and fall through a tiny, temporary one?
Okay, so we've got these incredible stories on one hand, and these mind-bending physics theories on the other. But we have to look at another possibility, a much more down-to-earth explanation. What if the glitch isn't in the universe at all? What if it's in our own heads?
Because here's the catch. When you really dig into these famous cases, the stories start to get a little shaky. Those two academics from Versailles, turns out they didn't actually compare their notes for months, and when they did, their stories were pretty different. Oh, and the biggest problem of all? Marie Antoinette had already left Versailles by 1789. She wasn't even there in 1792. And the Roman soldiers? Remember, Harry Martindale didn't tell anyone his story for 20 years. That is a long time for new archaeological discoveries to become public knowledge, and for his memory to maybe fill in the blanks, whether he meant to or not.
And this really is the skeptical argument, and it's a pretty strong one. Our brains, they aren't video cameras. They're not perfect. We invent false memories all the time. We're super easy to influence, and we are amazing at creating stories to make sense of weird feelings. Think about it. A little dizzy spell in a historic part of town, a weird feeling of déjà vu. It's not a huge leap for our brain to later turn that into something much, much bigger.
But hold on. Even if every single time slip story is just a trick of the mind, that doesn't mean the mystery is solved, not by a long shot. In fact, the truth might be even weirder.
I mean, Einstein himself is often credited with saying that reality is basically an illusion, just a very stubborn one. And quantum physics backs this up. It tells us that on the most basic level, the universe isn't made of solid, certain things. It's a fuzzy soup of probabilities and possibilities. So this straight, predictable line of time that we all experience every day, it might just be something our brains create to make sense of it all.
So that leaves us with one last fascinating question. Maybe time slips aren't about people accidentally breaking the laws of physics. Maybe they're moments where the illusion of time itself breaks down, giving us this terrifying but kind of thrilling peek at the much weirder reality hiding underneath. At the end of the day, the question isn't just whether time slips are real. It's whether our normal, everyday reality is real at all.